Hi, TheCinemaRanger here. I'm at a place in Kentucky called McConnell Springs. I first thought this was a hot springs, and that would have been the perfect place to do my analysis of Rise of Skywalker. Turns out it's actually just a springs. It's a cold spring created largely through pressure and moving water and stuff. But this is where I am, and you know, it's kind of swampy and Midwestern, but it'll do. This is where I am, and I'll just do my analysis here. I do want to stress I'll be doing an analysis of Rise of Skywalker, not a review, although I do want to start off with a bit of a review here. So spoilers are following. If you definitely want to keep this movie pristine and you haven't seen it yet, you should probably watch the film before you watch this entire video. As for a review, you know, the thing about Star Wars with me is it's kind of like, you know, a child in a sense, or the whole franchise is, you know, each movie is like a child. I can't help but love them. By my very nature, I'm inclined to love all things Star Wars, and it's really just a question not of do I like the film so much as are there some films that frustrate me more than others. Just like a kid, you love all your kids, but some of them are frustrating. I would put Rise of Skywalker in the it frustrates me at times category. You know, there are a number of choices which I think are essential, but I'm not 100% on board with the way those choices are made. To start off with, I would say the inclusion of the Emperor as a recurring villain was a tad problematic for me. I think the choice to kill Snoke in The Last Jedi was the right choice, because paired with the death of Luke Skywalker, that puts both Rey and Kylo in a position of spiritual leadership of their individual factions. Now, both of those characters become distinctly responsible for the way both the dark side and light side, the Resistance and the First Order, are going to grow and develop. And I like that idea of a new generation becoming fully, or at least more, responsible for the direction of their respective causes. And I think that's quite critical. And it's one of the things that I think a lot of people missed with the death of Snoke, who largely was a paper tiger to me always. There's nothing very interesting about him. It's too easy for Kylo to excuse his actions under the guise of following the order of the Snoke guy. And so I like the fact that the film pushed him out of the way. But given where the Rise of Skywalker wanted to go, they needed to bring some sort of big bad guy back. Personally, I probably would have just gone a little more strongly with this idea of the Sith spirits of, you know, old, constantly re-inhabiting new bodies, and rather than sort of literally bringing the Emperor back, have Palpatine come back as just another voice among thousands of Sith voices. In many ways, I thought the Return of the Emperor kind of devalued the Return of the Jedi. Although I think this particular series, if it has a strong point, one of the things that it's getting at is that, you know, every generation has its own battle, and you know, the Sith are going to be a recurring theme regardless. That there's no escaping. Every generation's going to have its Emperor. In this case, we have two generations that quite literally have the Emperor, but I think we can sort of surmise that there will be future Sith and future battles, and every generation has its war, and that's true. That's actually a really important takeaway from the new series, is that all of the victories, both in the original trilogy and in this new trilogy, they're temporary by their very nature. That's something I quite like, because it reminds me of, for example, how David Lynch maybe wrestles with good and evil in Twin Peaks. There are small victories and large victories, but the battle between light and dark, shadow and good, etc., etc., this is an ongoing confrontation, and that's exactly what we see happen here in The Rise of Skywalker. This is kind of a cool thing. It's called it's a sinkhole, and I kind of like this spot to talk about the Serpent scene in Rise of Skywalker, when the three heroes, and it's 3PO and the other ones, they fall into that hole and they're underneath the earth and they confront that serpent. You know, traditionally in the franchise, whenever these heroes are confronted by a monster, their first instinct is to to challenge it with violence, to take it out. And that's the first instinct of the heroes there as well. They got to battle their way past this wounded serpent, and in a very refreshing moment, Rey pushes them back and decides to put herself in harm's way and heal the creature. And that is actually a really, really great moment, not just for the film, but for the franchise, because it speaks to the larger themes the film is wrestling with. And in mythology, serpents tend to represent things like fertility, vitality, life-giving thing. There's the world serpent in Norse mythology. Another way to interpret the serpent is a biblical way in which the serpent leads us into temptation or sin. But in either case, in either interpretation, the idea of a wounded serpent that we perceive as evil, but really just as being something that needs love, care, and attention is nothing short of profound, in my opinion. And this is where the film really transcends itself and enters the realm of mythology in a way that I found very, very satisfying. It also foreshadows Rey's eventual decision to heal Kylo. So, it's not just a random creature. It could have been any kind of monster, but the fact that it's a serpent really does speak to some of the deeper ideas of healing the world, or healing the source of original sin. In either case, it's a really striking moment that allows Rise of Skywalker to evolve beyond a series of plot points and take its place among the lexicon of sort of great Star Wars films. Kylo's helmet is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, it's a cool looking helmet, so one of the things I didn't love in The Last Jedi is destruction of it. But I think the idea that, leaving childhood things behind was so important to the concept of that film that it was a necessary maneuver. And I think it's interesting the way the helmet comes back, because in the end it actually takes on greater meaning by being something he has at times coveted, at times hated, tries to bring it back, ultimately discards it again. The helmet becomes like this metaphor for Kylo's struggles, how he is wrestling with these different forces inside of him, and really becomes a showcase for his conflict between one identity and the other. Discarding the helmet moves him closer to Rey. Wearing the helmet moves him closer to the Emperor and Darth Vader. And it just becomes a highlight of his overall character arc. So that brings me to one of the most, I think, eloquent and beautiful moments in the film. The battle between Rey and Kylo on the water, on the ocean. It's a really beautiful, epic set piece. And what I love about it is the way that this fight sequence echoes the conflict we see between Obi-Wan and Anakin at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Except in Revenge of the Sith, that battle was over lava. Rivers of lava, they're walking across these bridges and these falling pylons. It's this great epic battle between these sort of two friends as they ultimately try to resolve their differences through pure violence. And now we come full circle. We come back to a battle over the elements, but this time, instead of the destructive, melting, corrupting, absolutely brutal presence of fire, we now have a battle over water. This is an element that creates life. It's the source of fertility, source of love and healing. And so we come sort of full circle. The story of Skywalker is ultimately one of love. If love is what undid Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith, love is what is going to redeem Skywalker in Rise of Skywalker. Anakin failed to see love properly. He tried to put it into his own terms. He tried to conform it into something that it could not be, rather than just giving up his role as a Jedi and admitting that his love for Padme was more important to him than his supposed destiny. Anakin tries to make the best of both worlds happen, and tries to force things into being that could not be. Ben is sort of given the same choice. He can try to force the situation, or he can concede to his feelings for Rey. And this is where I think the maternal power of the film really comes into play, because Star Wars has always been defined by this strong patriarchal element, with Darth Vader being the father, and now we add in this whole, Palpatine is the grandfather, and so there's this incredible patriarchal presence, and of course it tends to have a very dark tone to it. The father is this menacing, violent, terrorizing tyrant figure. But now we have Leia enter the story, and of course tragically she was supposed to have a bigger role. They did the best they could, and given the limited circumstances they had, I think they did a pretty admirable job bringing Leia and her maternal energy into the story. But that choice she makes to heal Ben, as she sends out that powerful message and sort of speaks to his heart as he's, out there on the water, that is a striking moment, because for the first time in the film, for really the first time in these movies, we see the true power of maternal love come into play. The mother is now a powerful force, and the idea of healing redemption, water, revival, all these things play out in this sort of mythic fashion, and that to me is absolutely where things work top notch with Rise of Skywalker, is in tapping into the theme of healing, giving it light and life in a way that it never has had before in the entire franchise. So kudos to J.J. Abrams and the team there for sort of realizing that full motif, for contrasting fire and water, for contrasting destruction and healing, for bringing love a full arc, both love as a destructive force, love as a redeeming force. That kiss at the end was great. Man, I wanted that so bad. The romance between Kylo and Rey was set up so well in The Last Jedi, that sort of smoldering, forbidden thing. And you think, well, that can't possibly come to fruition in this movie because of the way things ended in The Last Jedi. But they really smoothly allow those feelings to linger, and for those feelings to ultimately win out. You know, in some ways, you know, again, I hate this nitpicking thing I'm going to do here. I kind of wish they had let Ben live. It would be interesting to kind of envision how he genuinely atones for his actions, but also to sort of to see Rey and Ben existing as sort of entities that embody both the light and the dark simultaneously, both within themselves and as a couple. To see them create this new world as a couple would have been a really interesting and challenging direction for the franchise to go. That being said, they also really wanted this to be the end of the franchise, the end of the Skywalker story. So I can see why it's necessary to let Ben go at this point, because you can't say it's the final chapter in the Skywalker saga and yet have so much more Skywalker story to tell. Let's get back to this theme of healing, because we have a rift in the Star Wars fandom itself. There are people like me who think The Last Jedi was the best of the movies. I think there are going to be a lot of people who feel like The Rise of Skywalker was the best of them. Probably a lot of people who think the new movies were just trash and shouldn't have been made in the first place. Given that this film's preoccupation is with healing and the power of healing to lead to redemption, maybe there's something that we can all take from that as a fandom, we're better off working together and existing in a state of being healed rather than being separated. That's why I wanted this to be a hot springs. Because once you think about the idea of fire and water, Revenge of the Sith, Rise of Skywalker, once you sort of identify those elemental motifs, boy, does a hot spring make a lot of sense, because a hot spring is that place where heat and water sort of collide together. And I don't know why I thought I'd find such a thing in Kentucky. Obviously I need to hoof it to Yellowstone, but I don't have the time or the resources to do that just about right now. So, you know, Cold Spring will have to do. I guess content matters more than form anyway. Anyway, I hope you like this video. And if you do, please subscribe, or, you know, watch my other films, or feel free to comment. I'll try to, you know, reply as I can. No doubt there may have been things I missed, so I'd love to keep some ongoing discussions. And I hope our paths cross someday. Here's a little bit of water, since that was so important to this analysis. Here's a little bit of water to end things on. It looks cold. It doesn't look like it would heal me at all. I think it would kill me if I got in there. But, you know, we know water's important, so there we go.